So this next discussion is about the long-awaited mobile application for Jackalope. Specifically, this slice of mobile application is going to be looking at field data collection. And this has been a long time coming. We've wanted, and you guys have asked for quite a while, to have some sort of application that allows you to basically integrate your Jackalope short-term count schedule with the actual short-term count data collection activities, like going out and setting up the counter and picking it up and all of that fun stuff. And this discussion will be talking about that. The history of this was about 4 years ago at the 2017 Jackalope Users Group meeting. Tyler from Wisconsin did a presentation on a field data collection app that they had developed, and it was really cool. And they've been using it now for, I guess, 3 or 4 years. I'm not sure. And I'll be showing you some of that today. It was done in ESRI Collector, and it was really slick. It's always been intimidating for us to do this particular project because everyone does things completely differently, at least with regards to our interface to how you schedule. Everybody's field sheets are different. Everybody seems to be asking for different things. So everybody uses different counters with different restrictions. And it's been a little bit daunting to come up with a generalized solution to all of that. And so we sort of had kind of been kicking the can down the years. But things have changed. And another thing that's kind of daunting about the Wisconsin solution is that it's all done in Esri products. And we didn't talk Esri 4 years ago, either as people, we could use ArcGIS from a user perspective, but with regards to, syncing up feature classes with, Jackalope tables, that's not something we knew anything about. But that's changed. I'll be talking about our roads and highways synchronization service tomorrow, where we talk about exactly that. We now have code to consume ArcGIS layer information and synchronize that into Jackalope tables. And so we're in a much better place right now. And then a couple months ago, Kentucky, Melissa, got in touch with us, and we had a few meetings relating to this very topic. And we came away realizing we didn't know what we were talking about. And so the Kentucky districts kindly put together a stupendously good feature specification, basically a list of, okay, this is what the perfect mobile field collection app would look like. And it really gave a lot of clarity to what our design goals should be with this, because it was, like I said, really well thought out set of rules. And so the purpose of this presentation is to throw out a clay pigeon of a potential design for this. And if there is interest from people, we would then maybe move on to the next step, which I'll talk about at the end. But I just kind of want to whet people's appetite about what we're talking about here. Currently, this is what we do. We have, all the purple is Jackalope. We have the ability to create cycles and groups, and you associate your sites with said groups, and once a year you generate your schedule, and that gets updated with recounts or special counts or whatever. You create field sheets. Generally they're paper, but maybe you also do electronic, I'm not sure. And those are distributed, and then we lose track of everything at that point. Something happens, you probably have spreadsheets, you have ways of organizing this process, but it doesn't involve us at all. And then eventually the data comes back, and central office validates that data. They look at the field sheet information that came back. Maybe there's scribbled notes on it. Maybe there's diagrams that show how things were set up. And they say, if that's good, great, you're done. If it's not, they throw it back into the brown cloud of something happening. So the purpose of this is to clarify that for a few reasons. There's a lot of information that we just don't have. For example, in our scheduled status screen, we can tell you if there's good data or bad data, or if it's aired out, or if it's a split count with only one side. We can't tell you if the data's been collected but it hasn't actually shown up in Jackalope, which is a pretty big thing. It's something I'm sure you're managing right now manually, or maybe you do have some automated way of doing it, but that's a pretty big gap. And there's gaps like that all throughout this process that we sort of want to fill and have a Jackalope standard way of, just having the whole process from start to finish be having the knowledge there in Jackalope. What our proposal is to basically punt and not do the work ourselves and rely on the ArcGIS platform, which gives us so many tools immediately without us writing a single line of code for the most part. And so we'll be going over each of the 6 tools that we'll use, Workforce Collector, etc., here in a bit, but it gives us a lot. The biggest thing is we don't have to write the code. Someone's already written the code to deal with offline maps. If you go travel to a part of your state and there's no internet service, us having to write that would be a serious pain. And so Esri's already taken care of that. All the tools that I'm going to show you can all work in offline mode if they're set correctly. It also makes it easy to customize between states. And remember, that was one of my fears, is everybody does things completely different. We don't want to write a bunch of code that's like this general, our usual process is we have the general code, and then we have these configuration modules all throughout. That's really daunting here. And with Esri, it's just really easy scripts, really easy setting up feature classes correctly, setting up feature class layers so that the permissions are correct. It's all, configuration as opposed to customization of code. And of course, the other advantage is we don't have to write a mobile app, Esri already has. Each of these things is available in a mobile app. They've already dealt with all the complications of, is it an iPad versus an iPhone or whatever, an Android, or is it a browser-based app? They've already dealt with that. We don't have to deal with that. And finally, everybody uses Esri. It's pretty ubiquitous at this point. You probably, almost all of your states have some sort of Esri endpoint enterprise server that allows you to publish your layers. Even if it's not publicly available, it probably still exists. It seems like most states have ESRI, and there's not really a lot of competition in the GIS world. So we would be able to pull in things like traffic sections. So if your field person is out there in the field, they know the amount of roadway that they're trying to collect. And if they have an optimized, if it's optimized here, they know they can do it because it's still within the traffic section. Kentucky also mentioned something called school buffers, which I'd never heard of before. They have different rules for counting if it's within a certain distance of schools versus not, whether you count them during the school year or not. And Esri just kind of gives us that. We don't have to work for it. Integrating an external layer into an Esri map is super simple. And that's, again, code we don't have to write. And our goal here is to get it done quickly as possible, get it behind us, and I'll be talking about that here. Our primary design goals, and this came mostly from the Kentucky exchanges, are listed here. Number one, just remove the need for paper field sheets. Just everything's electronic. You're not passing paper back and forth. It can't get lost on the truck. It's all electronic at this point. Just get rid of the paper. That's kind of the number one design goal. And then making the field person's job easier pretty much throughout the whole process, both in setting up the count, ending the count, getting to where they need to be, prioritization of the counts, all of that, just make that a lot easier than it is now. And then pretty important is integrating all this information between Jackalope and ESRI. So when you add a new site in Jackalope that is supposed to be scheduled for this current year, it automatically goes up and updates the correct layers in ESRI, and it's just there, it works, and vice versa. When someone finishes their field sheet and hits go, it automatically gets transferred back to Jackalope so that we can use it for binding information and things like that. Also, allowing for site and intersection updates. So some people rely on their field crew to notice that, you said that was a one-in-one lane road, one northbound, one southbound, but actually there's two in each direction. The ability for the field crew to actually update that and then have that seen back at central office in a staged way, which we're going to really focus on tomorrow when we do the roads and highways demo. In a map-focused workflow, you're not looking at a spreadsheet, you're not looking at a stack of field sheets this big, you're doing everything with a map. You're routing with a map, you're doing your prioritization with a map. That's the main UI. And pretty importantly is real-time collaboration between the field and central office. Central office will get that completed field sheet as soon as it's done, and they'll know that that site has been ticked off, and they'll know that things are getting done. So those are our primary design goals. Again, based mostly off of the Kentucky email and things we've learned from Wisconsin. So let's look at some of the field sheets that we're trying to replace. Let's start here and get an idea of what we're trying to do. Okay, I'm gonna actually go here. All right, this is probably easier to see. Okay, this is Kentucky's field sheet. There's a lot of information in here, and a lot of things to enter in, and a lot of context information, and I'm not going to go through all this, but it's all manual, right? Location, latitude, longitude, road street names. I think, as I recall, Jackalope does fill some of this out, but there's still a lot of manual stuff to enter. The goal of this project would be to take that out, get rid of all the manual stuff as much as possible. A place for them to scribble where the station location is, place for comments. So this is a pretty typical field sheet for people. I also want to show Iowa's. Let's see, right? Yeah. So here, I mostly mention this because I will forget over and over again that when we're talking about collection, short-term count collection, I'm also including in there turning movement collection, so intersections, basically. So in Jackalope, you can schedule both site counts and intersection counts. And as I go through this presentation, I will continually forget to say intersection. Just understand that intersections are part of the deal. This, by the way, is a beautiful diagram. I don't know what you guys do in Iowa, but I could never in a million years reproduce this. It's just beautiful. But I just want to show this so that, because I'm going to talk about something a little bit later, there's a lot of really good information in this field sheet, right? There's, all building, what they are, etc. It makes you wonder if this is something that could be replaced with electronic information. And I will be talking about how we could do that in our new system. Okay, that's Iowa. And then here's Wisconsin, which is a lot smaller. And I think it's a lot smaller because they do most of their field data collection with what I'm about to show you, the Esri collector software. And so, they can get away with a lot less information because they're getting just so much more just from the map. And so, again, we're going to be talking about that, but I just wanted to reference that as we go along. Here are the 6 products that we're thinking of using, and we may not need all of them. You may decide why do we need that, and we will kick it off the table. But I wanted to show you each of them just to give you an idea of what can be available. So the first one is collector, and this is sort of the workhorse. And this is what Wisconsin is using for what we're talking about right here. They're setting up short-term counts, monitoring the status of the short-term counts, getting in meta information, so it comes back on electronic form, and then they manually submit it to or get it into Jackalope. So the collector is basically this. It's a really flexible data entry thing that can be associated with points. So basically what would happen is Jackalope would synchronize this collector layer whenever the schedule is changed in Jackalope. And so this is basically the field crew's work plan, right? They see each of these markers. Each of these markers has a different meaning. In Wisconsin, this means wavetronics collected, so it's done. Time mark collected, so that's done, wavetronics. And then the blue ones are pending, so time mark is pending, it hasn't been collected yet. So, and they have, I'll show you all their markers here in a bit, but they can at a glance look at their map and see how their count season is going. If they see a whole lot of blue, you know, not so great. If there's a lot of green and things like that, we're looking good. And this is all the collector application. What's actually stored in here is pushed right now, I think manually by Rob or Tyler. So this comes from Jackalope through a table, and they get this into ESRI to ArcGIS. And so these gray fields are pre-populated. So there's a pre-populated site ID, pre-populated location description, etc. And then they have the actual data fields down below that fill up the rest of the stuff that can't be pre-populated, like when it was placed, the counter ID, and things like that. I think down below they even have like lanes and information like that. So this form is really flexible. It can contain you can embed GPS coordinates in here. You can read from barcodes. So if your counters have barcodes and you have an iPad, you can just point your camera. You can press the little barcode button and it'll read that field from a barcode. It can attach photos and videos pretty well. And so basically you could snap a photo of the count site and you're good to go. And so part of our job in setting this up, again, we're just assuming this is going to be completely different for every state, is one of our design goals, our stated design goals, is to make this as easy as possible for the field crew. So we're going to spend time with you trying to make this as minimal as possible, you know, following the 80-20 rule. You know, most of the counts look the same, and you know, you don't need to pay attention to a lot of things that aren't going to change from count to count. So imagine the following scenario. Imagine above this site ID here, we just had a label called action. And then under that action, we had a drop-down list. And I didn't mention, but there's a scripting thing behind all this. You can have some columns, you know, be derived from other columns, and there's just a whole scripting tool that allows you to manage this information. So we have this action drop down, and let's say we go to your state and you have 3 ways of setting up time marks. You know, you have the standard way, you have like the split count way, and then you have like the standard but all the channels reversed or something like that. In that action column, let's pretend the status is pending. Let's say it's not completed. You know, you click on that, it would be populated with start standard time mark count or start split count, time mark split count. And when they clicked on that, what would happen is we would automatically update the status to time marks started. Oops. We would automatically capture the GPS location. So part of your documentation would be next to the counter when you click the action button. So it'll automatically take the GPS location and update that. It'll automatically set up the place date. Like we can figure that out, right? He just placed it. So we can at least have a really good default value for that. And then the next process could be scan the barcode, and then that fills in the counter ID. And then maybe take a video of the surroundings and you know, how the loops were set up and where you are in the section. And maybe we could even talk to it and say, oh, we had this problem, et cetera, et cetera. Or pictures or whatever. The idea being, as part of our implementation, is to go through with you, the subject matter experts, and with our ESRI consultant, because we are not going to do this ourselves, and come together with a set of rules here that we can automate this as much as possible, both for making the field people's job easier and for data accuracy, right? We're human beings, and every time we interact with a data form, there's a decent chance, a non-zero chance, that we're going to screw it up somehow. That's just life. So, and that's just someone sitting there at a desk. You know, imagine the the field crew person, standing by the side of the road with windy and it's cold and he can't get the stupid tablet to work because his core body temperature is like 6. What's his error rate going to be? It's going to be pretty high. So the most automation we could have, the better. The more automation that we could have, the better. Just get it done as quickly as possible. So this is the Esri collector. It's actually setting up the field sheet information with help from Jackalope. Jackalope will have pre-filled as much as possible. We would also have these automation methods in there that will fill out things as well as possible, but then still give the field personnel flexibility to change stuff. If it's almost standard, but there's this one little thing that's different, they could go in there and just change that one little thing and hit go, and they'd be happy. So that's the Esri collector. That's the core of this, and this is what WisDot is using. Like I said, we're going to be seeing a little bit more of this in later slides. And by the way, if there's questions, I won't see them, so I'm going to repeat what
Yeah,
Catherine.
I was just going to mention to you, Joe, if maybe you wanted to take a moment and read comments. There have been some added. Yeah.
Let me find it. Hold on. Where is my go to meeting? There it is. Okie dokie, 4. Yeah, just yell at me if there's a comment. I won't see it. Okay, Margaret says we implemented map-based scheduling in Idaho, and it's completely replaced our field sheets. Good. Really saved time and helped John with scheduling and Raymond with data QA. Well, I don't know if you would mind, Margaret. I mean, Rob and Tyler have already agreed to kind of help us out because they've been doing this for years. They've struggled with all the things and they've figured out the problems. And maybe we could add you to the list of people we could kind of mind meld with and figure out what our hurdles might be. Stephen says having turning room accounts will be really helpful long-term for Meyer. Yep, fair. Tyler says there are many online ArcGIS online application widgets, GIS application tools available that can be used in the different application, measuring statistics, etc. Yeah, that's the advantage of going with ArcGIS is it just has so much already. We don't have to recreate the wheel. And I really like having software that we don't have to write and develop and debug and test and document and all that other fun stuff. AGOL might consume credits. Yeah, that's true. And that's the assumption is, yeah, there's going to be a licensing thing here, Christy. We aren't at that point of figuring it out exactly. And I'm not even certain that we want to use your AGOL credits. I know that's what WisDot uses, right? Tyler, I think, or Rob sent me an email. Someone sent me an email saying that that's how you guys do that. Rob, I think.
We're trying to avoid using AGOL and use Portal instead so that authentication is through the user's AD account.
Yeah, that's actually also supported. So if you have it would be our least preferred method because that is the most, then we have to be the most tightly integrated with your internal GIS. But it's certainly, it doesn't actually really matter from us, from our perspective, because Jackalope is just going to be reading and writing layers. That's basically what Jackalope is going to be doing. And then there's all the configuration, which can happen both in AGO or in ArcGIS Enterprise server. Okay, so Christy says Minnesota has been testing Portal and field maps, and we have found these issues. Authentication from Portal to field maps on Android is not working. So by the way, before I go further, apparently field maps is super buggy, and I have a slide on this in a second, and I'll explain what field maps is, but yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that. In Minnesota, iOS is the approved OS that are issued. Android is not yet allowed to have a data plan. Okay. The setting is to only allow the creator to edit a feature is not being honored in field maps. Okay, because that's actually not a field map thing, that's a layer view thing, but okay. On state issues devices, not sure if this is authentication, but Minnesota is basically at a halt until it's fixed. Some bugs could be.
It's very strange that we were trying to figure out where the bug is. Is it in field maps? Is it in Portal? But it's behaving differently if it's a state issued device versus people who are testing on their personal devices.
Oh,
and so I was in a 3-hour meeting with Esri and we were going around and around. So just I'm just given to save everyone headache, like have your
Yeah.
IT people test it on what you can legitimately get your field staff rather
And
than
this,
having IT tested on their own devices.
and this, by the way, is why my preference is to use AGO and bundle the licensing into whatever maintenance contract increase there would be for this, because I don't want to get into those issues. I know, AGO, I'm sure also has bugs, but we won't have those sort of bugs. So, but Nicholas says, everything we've used with Collector, we often find use iOS over Android fixes issues. Fair. And Collector is no more apparently, so yeah, I saw a bunch of bug things for field maps, which is what is replacing Collector. Nicholas says, are you tying the field data to the actual count or to the site? So we get counts that may have had change what was requested by our vendor due to the variables at a location when they arrived to count. So I think the plan, first of all, we're not going to have a completely general plan. Again, this is going to be pretty state specific. But the plan is that, at least in my mind, is that there'd be a one-to-one relationship between a collector row and like a count. So if it was a split count, you would have 2 collector rows. And so it would be, the field data would be to the count. So however, if you had a one raw data file come in and it was a split count, it would know how to get to the correct field sheet, and vice versa for the other side. Did that answer your question, Nicholas? Cool. All right, so this is Collector. Now, and it sounds like a lot of people are already familiar with Collector. But here's some of the other apps that are pretty cool. So the first is Workforce. And Workforce is essentially the to-do list for your data collection. And it has 2 components that we will talk about. First is the dispatcher. So the dispatcher is responsible for prioritizing each of the counts, maybe having a due date, or it has to be counted within these days. Did I say priority? Assigning the actual count. So here's the list of counts, and I want these to be done by this engineering firm, and I want these to be done by whatever. And again, if that information is already in Jackalope, we will pre-fill that. Like for example, in Minnesota, you have the responsible agency field that tells Jackalope who's responsible for collecting that. That would get pushed forward into Esri Workforce. And this is optional. It doesn't have to happen, but here's what the dispatcher view looks like. So basically you can go through and assign workers to tasks and prioritize it. Like basically what I just said, due by dates. You could enter in special accounts here. Again, we're going to be synchronizing this between Jackalope and ESRI. So you can add a special count here, and we will hopefully have enough information to update it in Jackalope. And again, it's optional. It doesn't have to happen. Part of when we update the count schedule is we are going to inject a bunch of collector rows, so a bunch of these rows, and also inject a bunch of workforce rows. So it's all happening at the same time. There'll be a one-to-one relationship between workforce and collector with regards to, well, probably with regards to how the collection is done. At the field personnel's view of workforce this is what allows them to sort their list, by priority or by distance or however they want to do it. It also gives you a super easy, apparently, way to get to navigation controls, which I'll be talking about here in a second. And you can search through the list, but this is basically the to-do list for the field crew. The next is Esri Explorer, and this allows you to basically annotate maps. So imagine you're looking at the intersection and you zoomed all the way in. You could, with your finger on a tablet, in theory, draw circles or, annotate, like if you remember this, this X, I assume that's where the field personnel were, this X, those sort of things could be annotated in the intersection from the ESRI map. So this is, again, an optional thing. If that's something that you would want as part of your workflow, that's something that this would support. Esri Navigator is basically like their Google Maps, except it allows for easy route planning. So you can go there and tap, 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 tap on each of your either workforce entries or your collector entries and create a route. And you could do that just through the UI like that, or you can, I believe you can just do like a rectangle. I don't know if anybody's used this. I've never actually used it. I'm relying on their marketing information here. But draw a rectangle and then hit this optimize button, which is supposed to go through and take all the counts that you're supposed to be doing and nicely give you a plan of attack, where you should drive that will get you there in the most efficient manner, which is pretty cool. It's the old traveling salesman problem if you're a computer nerd. The next is Esri dashboards. So this is something that Melissa uses to keep track of her counts. Melissa's part of central office, and she has her districts, or the districts go and do most of the counts. And as the year progresses, she can, by querying Jackalope tables, determine how many counts have actually come in, and then do percent complete and figure out how everything is going. Esri dashboards allows you to do the same thing, but in a more visual way. And it's also a pretty easy way. Where is it? So here's some examples of Esri portal. So imagine a situation where you had your count map here with all of your nice colors that shows you, okay, we've got complete things, we've got incomplete things, we've got things in progress, and that's just part of this map here. You could have Melissa's, basically like a chart here of all the districts that say, okay, here's how complete we are, 100% being the top, and she could just really quickly go through and figure out where her count program is. These have the ability to drill down. None of these do, but I think there's one over here that did. So you can actually drill into those and get, for example, the monthly breakdown of how, no, I'm not going to find it, but you could get a monthly breakdown of how each district is doing. And I'm sure there's 100 other different metrics that you could just quickly right here go to this site or go to this one page and see exactly what you wanted. And Esri dashboard is, I did a light dive into it, and it looks pretty easy. I don't know if anybody's used it. I don't think coming up with something like I just said that replaces Melissa's tables here with something more like this, that doesn't seem like it's actually a lot of work, and it's a lot of bang for the buck with regards to work versus what you get at the end. And it allows you to submit by date, filter by different columns. It's just really flexible. So this is Esri dashboard. I'm just gonna, and then Esri Maps, probably everybody listening to this call knows how to use Esri Maps, so I'm not gonna actually spend much time on it. This is Wisconsin's collector map, and you could see the different markers here. So they have essentially, the pendings are blue, so pending time mark is placed is purple, time mark is completed is green. So all the greens are completed, all the blues are pending, and then all the purples are placed, I think. And it's broken out by type. And so time mark class versus time mark volume, Wavetronics versus, and then there's priority. So if there's something that needs to be done right away, special count or something like that, that's that icon. And it's different from the other blues, so it stands out. And recount, recount completed, recount placed. And so they can just visually look at this map and just see how things are going, which is fantastic. And I think it's exactly what we need to do. Esri Maps lets you change the base map. So if you want to look at a satellite view, It lets you add layers. So this is what we were talking about before. When we set up your workflow maps, they would have probably, if we can get your traffic sections, they will show up there. What do we call it? The school buffer zones, for example, they could show up there, or any other information you might need to help the field people do their jobs. Can all be injected into Azure Maps. This is just a different screen, a different way of their map. This is WizDot's TC map, which just shows all their counts. It's kind of cool. But I wanted to show you that the layers are here, and it gives you all the flexibility that you probably already know about with ArcGIS. We started mentioning this already, but Field Map is what they are migrating to, at least on the mobile side. So we talked about most of these, and on the mobile side, and so right now, or 2 years ago, you had to have each of these installed, each of these logged in, each of these on anyone's phone. They're slowly changing that, so there's one cohesive application that does all of that, but they're not there yet. It doesn't have workforce, for example, which is pretty big. And as we were just talking about, it seems like it's kind of buggy so far. So hopefully they'll fix that before we roll anything out. I know, looking at comments, are we still good? Yes, no. Christy, Minnesota found we need to separate the prescribed count location site versus the actual lat long of the count itself. That way we could have a one-to-many relationship of site to count. Yep, that's exactly what I was thinking too, Christy. And we'd make it easy would be the goal. You know, going back to our example when we were looking at the Wisconsin collector, and you have an actions drop down. You know, if you do an action split count, that record can programmatically be duplicated. That's something that collector allows if you have access. And then part of the documented steps for the worker would be to, you know, then go over to the other side of the street, press the button so that record's lat long gets updated correctly, and all the other information is updated correctly. So we're going to be talking about JWS synchronization a lot more tomorrow. If you don't know, so there's Jackalope, and then we have the Jackalope web services, if you don't know that already. It's a separate program that allows for programmatic querying of the Jackalope database, as well as other actions like this. The ability to synchronize between Jackalope and a ArcGIS layer is all written in JWS. And we're going to talk about that more tomorrow. The current JWS implementation of this isn't enough. We need to do more. But the goal would be, you know, like all of our JWS synchronization, and we'll go over this tomorrow, is driven by our metadata table. It will be bidirectional. It should happen frequently. It's probably not going to be real time, but the goal would be like every 5 minutes. And you know, the changes can be staged. So if a site change comes in and you want someone to check that first, that's something that can be set up with this JWS synchronization. Here's kind of the architecture. And this isn't exactly correct, but it's close enough. So we have a Jackalope database. We've got Jackalope doing its thing. We got JWS doing its thing, which is synchronization between ArcGIS REST server or directly to ArcGIS online. And then it communicates with your geospatial databases in whatever form they are. We really don't see much of a difference from querying and synchronizing between AGO and someone's ArcGIS enterprise. And my hope is that continues to stay the same, but we really don't care. Our preference would be that we have our own ArcGIS online world, and that then we just interact with whatever your enterprise is, but that may not be an option. So this is a really ugly slide, and I always feel bad these days now that we have like really good slide makers at HTT. But this is an exploded version of what the first slide we had, which purple is Jackalope. So you're still creating cycles and groups. You're still associating sites with the correct group, and the annual schedule process that figures out what sites need to be counted is still done in Jackalope. But then automatically through these teal JWS interactions, we synchronize. We synchronize each of this Oracle information up to the appropriate layers in ArcGIS. So again, we're gonna be creating collector rows, and we're gonna be creating workforce rows, and then it's up to the dispatcher to do something with that if they want. Again, this is optional; they don't have to do anything. But in the ArcGIS workforce, the dispatcher could then go and prioritize counts or assign counts to people or do whatever they need to do to kind of control the workflow of the count season. And then once that happens, field collectors use the workforce app and collector to do what they need to do, and the navigation app to plan out their daily travels and all the things they need to do. And then that gets automatically synchronized back to Jackalope. And then unfortunately right now, until we get polling, right now the field collectors will still have to submit their data files to the central office like they do now. So if your districts zip up the files and shoot them off to central office, and the central office people have to unzip that and submit those, you know, that process still needs to happen. On the forever list, just like this app, has been a polling module, which will allow multiple things. First of all, coordination with your continuous count devices. Secondly, and auto polling, both auto polling and manual polling. Secondly, once we know how to speak to these devices, we can actually do this hopefully in an app as well, so that you could sit there and your workflow would be collect the counter, hit the action, you know, stop count, it goes and does its thing, and then you go over and you know, through Bluetooth if your devices support it, or USB, or however you communicate from your device to your machine now, we would automatically pull that data file off, associate it with the correct field sheet information, and submit it automatically. That would be the goal. That's the dream. But polling needs to be implemented first. And then again, you validate the account. You have more information now probably than you did before, and you can either you know, set it up for recount, in which case we're all the way back to the beginning, or we're done. Yeah, I'm on time. That's great. So the kind of the last piece here is just curious if how many people would be interested in this being part of the Jackalope package. It sounds like Minnesota, Margaret, and maybe you, Nicholas, already have something in place that's similar to this, and I know Wisconsin does. But I'm curious if there's anybody else that would be interested in this addition to Jackalope, pulling it all in.
I'm a little worried about the unknowns about the things that we don't have control over, like the number of credits or state buys, what version of Arc server you have. Like I'm a little worried about that, making it difficult for someone in our position to say yes or no.
So a paradigm where we just black box it and say you're getting an ArcGIS, you know, count or whatever, and that's what you use, and we can, you know, use your single sign-on information from your portal, hopefully, if they allow that. That wouldn't be an option where we don't even integrate into Minnesota's enterprise ArcGIS.
I mean, right now they've pretty much told us you have to be inside in the AD group to even use portal. So, and like a lot of the bugs we're researching might be version related, and an agency upgrading to a new version is not something the lowly counting staff get to decide. It's usually run by like your roads and highways team. At least that's the case. That's the case here in Minnesota. It's just, I'm worried about the bugs in field map too. And
Yeah. Well, I'm just hoping that they'll fix those. I mean, Esri is a huge company. I agree with you. I'm much more scared about interacting directly with the internal state's GIS. than I am about using AGO, and then somehow, if there's need for that information to get pushed into the enterprise somehow, we have a separate thing to do that. But I'm not
Unmuted.
it needs to happen because
We found with the AGOL, there being some like publishing issues of people not sort of honoring the whole what's public data, what's approved data. Like I've had people make copies of data and then publish it out without no metadata, and it was a little bit like the Wild West. So Minnesota, that's why we're moving to Portal, because there's more control over publishing. So it would be a little, you know, if you just set up that back end stuff to make sure it's not just sitting out there, especially if it's not approved. I think it's a discussion with each person's like IT department for sure.
yeah, I think that'll be a part of it. Excuse me. And by the way, I think I mentioned this before, but each state implementation will have a pretty serious upfront, let's get our heads together, figure out what is going to be the best way to do this. Because it is going to be, every state's going to be different. I know that already. And yeah, that would be a big part of it. So for the people, so looks like several people are interested. Melissa in Kentucky, you had a question earlier about access as well and firewalls and all that stuff. Do you have a sense for whether, if we completely black box this and said, here's Jackalope, and oh, by the way, it's also ArcGIS online. Do you have a sense for whether that kind of solution would work? Or is it like Minnesota where they're going to say, no, you have to use, you know, our own thing? Because that does make it harder. Let's see, well, there's a lot of interest. Spencer. So Margaret says it took years to get our portal architecture public facing. So I'm not, by the way, none of this is intended to be public. It's just supposed to be available to the field crew. Like, I don't even think you want people looking at that portal that says what percentage you are done. To me, I was thinking that would be a internally central office used thing. Just FYI.
It's getting getting people to be able to collect, like, hey, I collected a count here. If you're getting it from outside agencies, that's where it has to be public. You have to make the layer public for people to add to it, and
it has to be public as opposed to, I see what you mean. So when I say public, I mean non-authenticated. That's probably what I should have said.
And it might be that you could get outside users to get an account somehow. Like I shared the screenshots with Steven, who's he does GIS for us and Jackalope stuff, and he's like, it looks like it might work, but it would take a lot of setup, and there just might be other moving parts at a state that would, yeah. IT department set up the AGL service apps that tie into the database, so it's really got to be like an IT talk.
Yeah. My dream is that we don't have that talk, but I mean, for Minnesota, it sounds like it definitely, if you even were interested, it would. So we have Missouri, possibly Bill, possibly from Kansas, Mark Booster for Nevada, maybe Nicholas, maybe Chad. I wish you wouldn't scroll back down when someone put a new thing in there. Where was I? Okay, yeah, Chad said Wyoming, and then Kentucky. Okay, Melissa says, oh, and Susie said Wisconsin as contractors use the AGI app. Yeah, as long as they are not writing straight to our database, working around the firewall shouldn't be an issue. It sounds like OIT is willing to do whatever it takes to keep it in-house. Okay. Oh, and Margaret says possibly for Idaho. I thought you'd had something. Did I misunderstand? Or you were just talking about Portal. Okay. I'll be honest, we were having our computers reboot on us for updates, so I missed some of the presentation. All right, well, we can talk about it offline, Margaret, and like all of our presentations, this will be available after where we go from here, I mean, it sounds like there is enough interest at least to maybe go a little bit further. And maybe our focus should be less on the technical issues and more on, is this even viable from like what you're saying, Christy, from a state's IT and security? Maybe I was naive in thinking that we could black box this. So that might be something we have to research. We did want to
We
collect.
have a statewide contract with Esri, like all Minnesota state agencies contract with one like massive contract. So it might be seen as like we're paying for the same thing twice because we already pay for that suite of apps with Esri's side. So we'd have to be careful about that too.
Yeah. How many people on average do you think would be using this? How many field collectors do people have on average? Like how many logins? Just like order of magnitude. So Minnesota has 15. That's roughly what I was. Chad has 5. Okay. Yeah, I was thinking there would never be more than, I don't know, 25 users. 8 and 4 in the office, so 12, 15, 6. Yeah, so the numbers I'm seeing are roughly what I'm thinking. And at that numbers, the license costs aren't horrible. They could actually be bundled into a maintenance agreement without jacking it up too much. Oh, 50 for Christine. Yeah, so maybe for you, we would have to use your internal enterprise licenses. So the next step is, we want to collaborate with WizDot. I might have made this slightly clear, but we are not Esri experts. We would want to coordinate with an Esri expert, and Rob and Tyler have done exactly that. They have a contractor that set up the collector information and have been updating it over the years. Our dream would be to hire that same contractor to do this work. Again, this is not something we want to do in-house. We want to throw money at this problem and just get it done. So we would want to explore that world. We pick Rob and Tyler's brain, and Drew's been doing a really good job of doing that already. He already has a bunch of workflows that have been diagrammed and documented. But maybe even go a little bit further and maybe talk to this contractor and see what issues they had and if they'd be willing to take this on. Ideally, I'd like to have something a little bit better to show than what I just did, which is pretty much all from ESRI's marketing materials, except for the cool Wisconsin screenshots. It was all just marketing stuff. It would be nice to actually see if this really worked well. And then repeat this presentation to the important people at each state. I think in this first bullet, we do need to also just have some sort of an idea of how much difficulty this is going to face, how much difficulty we're going to face from an IT perspective when we do this. And it is, yeah, so let's just leave it at that. Every time I move, my chat window moves. Okay, 20 to 25. So these are all issues we need to deal with. We're not at the point where we have solutions yet. Really, we just need to know if we're going in the right direction. If there were no interest in this at all, we would just say forget about it. But we would like to proceed if there is interest.